Yeah, so, it's kind of hard to believe it was 20 years ago, but it was 20 years ago. It was the first Thursday in May, and I remember it like it was yesterday. I was 33 years old, and, if you're looking at my life from the outside, it was picture perfect. I had one of the most successful chiropractic clinics in the world. I was seeing upwards of 850 clients a week. I was making well over $500,000 take home a year. Married to a runway model, 2 beautiful children. And I had all the toys, I had the mansion outside of the city with all of that jazz, and a house in the mountains, a house on the beach. And anyone walking by would be like, wow, this is it. This guy's really, he's really got his shit together. He's really got it. And wow, that day really changed my life. I had no idea how impactful it was going to be for what was to come. And I remember it because I was only working 3 days a week. I was seeing this huge volume of clients, and I was actually working 3 8-hour days a week. I was doing all this work Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. And that Thursday, I had seen my record volume of clients that day. I'd done 283 clients that day. And they all paid in cash. So, imagine the amount of money that I had in my pocket. I was charging I think it'd be the equivalent of $25 a visit. So, you don't have to be a mass genius to know I had a pretty big wad of cash with me. And I ended up the day, I wrapped up the day. It was like 6:30, and I left the studio, I left the clinic, went down, and par to my habit then, I went to my local watering hole. It was 2 doors down, and knocked back 3 really strong Belgian beers. Because at that time, when I was working and seeing such a high volume of people, I would get home, I would just be exhausted. But my outlet, my escape was alcohol, and I was putting back, and I was drinking this really strong Belgian beer. And so I had finished the day off. I was super proud of myself. I had set my record, and I go down to the bar, and I have like 3 of these really strong Belgian beers, and I remember I jumped into my car and had this fancy, Audi sedan with the big, German radio system, and I got in my car and I was driving home, and I was listening to this song by Nelly, the artist. That might be classic music for some of you guys listening, but for some other people from my generation, they'll know who I'm talking about. And Nelly has this song. It's called Number One. And the song says, I am number 1, 2 is not a winner, and 3 no one remembers, but I am number 1. And that was what I felt like. I was number 1. I had my shit together. I had everything going on. And so I drive into the house and I pull up, and first thing I notice, my wife's car's not there. And I walk up, and on the front door, there was a note, and the note said, sorry, I had to run to a conference for the next 2 days. I was told to give a lecture. I'll see you in a couple of days. And that was not a good sign, because, my marriage was in serious trouble at that time. And specifically that weekend, I had 2 kids. I have 2 kids. My son at that time was 4 years old, and his sister was 2. They're now 23 and 21. And they had been taken to the beach by their grandparents because my wife's parents knew that we were in trouble. They knew that things weren't going right in the marriage. And so they had taken the kids to the beach for the weekend so that we could have some time together. And so I get home, and she's gone, and there's a note, and, that she's going away for a couple of days. And, I didn't know it. I didn't have any proof, but I suspected there might be somebody else involved. And it just rocked me. It rocked me to the core. And, that, there could be another person, and, my marriage is going to hell in a handbasket. And so I remember I walked in and kind of looked around the house and walked outside, and I remember picking up my phone and looking at my phone, and just, there was no one I wanted to call. There was no one I wanted to talk to. The only true friends I had alienated them. Most of the people at that time that I was hanging out with were just, they were, as into the money thing as me. And I really didn't feel a real deep connection with almost anybody. And so I went outside, and we had this huge, beautiful, like 8-man jacuzzi under the palm trees. And so I was like, yeah, I'll just jump in the jacuzzi. And I went to the guest house, and I grabbed a 5th of Jack Daniels, and I climbed into the jacuzzi, and I drank a 5th of Jack Daniels sitting in a jacuzzi. And that is not a good mix. A bottle of alcohol in a hot tub is not recommendable for anybody. And I'm just sitting there drinking this whiskey, and, all of my muscles are relaxing in the hot water. And then, now I know that these toxins are just flushing through my system. And I just went into this dark hole. It was the darkest, deepest hole that I had ever been in my life. And I just felt like I was just sliding down this immense black tunnel. And, it had gotten dark outside, and I literally finished a bottle of 5th of Jack Daniels. And, I was just a shell of a human being. I didn't want to live anymore. And so I literally crawled out of the jacuzzi. Literally, I couldn't even walk. I bet I had probably been in the jacuzzi for 4 to 5 hours at this point, 4 to 5 hours. And so I crawl out, and I remember I literally crawled over to the pool house, which is where, the motors are and storage for the cleanage stuff. And I was just looking around in this daze, and I saw this orange electric cord hanging on the wall. And I knew what I was going to do. I knew right then I was going to take my life, and I was going to make her pay. That bitch is going to pay. I'm suffering so bad. And so I grabbed this electrical cord, and I staggered my way over across the yard. And we had this really beautiful wrought iron gazebo that we had a nice dining area under. And so I was looking around, because I was looking at the bedroom window, because I wanted her to find me. I wanted her to see me. So, and I was like, yeah, that's the line. So I go over to this gazebo, and I'm looking at this window like this, like imagining, I'm going to show you. I'm going to show you. And I stand up on this stool, and I throw the cable over the gazebo, over this wrought iron rail, and I'm pulling on it to test my weight, to see if it will hold my weight. And right in that instant, I look out of the corner of my eye like that, and I see through the palm trees my son's trampoline. And I saw on this angle that the trampoline was off on this side angle, but I just immediately had a vision of what was going to happen. I realized that my son's grandparents were going to bring him and his sister home before anybody else. And my son, he was 4 at that time, and he loved that trampoline. I mean, he would get out of the car, and it could be thunderstorm, hail, sleeting. He did not care. He was going to jump on that trampoline until we went and got him off. And I knew he was going to rush to that trampoline. He was going to jump on the trampoline, and he was going to look through those trees, and he was going to find his dead father. And that image in my head it was total circuit overload to my nervous system. I collapsed off the stool, literally fell on the ground, started screaming, cussing. I mean, I was beating the ground. I was cussing the universe. I was cussing God, literally cussing God. I was like, F you. I hate you. I have everything. I have everything. Everything they told me. Everything that they told me. And I want to die. And, looking back on it, I had everything. I was born in 1969 in San Diego, California, but I was raised in Nashville, Tennessee, and I was raised in the Deep South. And we were raised as young men on a concept that I read later in a book called A Season for Life. I can't remember the author's name. And he calls it the 3 Bs. And it's the ball field, which is where you're supposed to be successful from 0 to 16. You have to be a great athlete, and you're pushed into sports and you're pushed into competition. And then from 16 to about 30, the second B is the bedroom. You have to be a stud. You have to have sex with a lot of women. You have to be a playboy. And then the third B from 30 on is the boardroom. You have to be successful. You have to make lots of money. And, by all those measures, I had all of that stuff. I wasn't a great athlete, but I had, one of the top 10 to 20 chiropractic clinics in the world by volume. My wife was a runway model. They had posters of her in the city, and she was in magazines. And so I had that covered. And I was making tons and tons and tons of money, but I felt totally empty on the inside, totally empty. And I fell there to my knees and just screaming like, please, God, help me, show me the way. And bro, I'll tell you right now, whoever listens was listening that day, because the next day, literally the shit hit the fan in my life. Things came out that I discovered that really, showed me that the relationship was ending. We needed to end it. And immediately, I knew, wow, this is getting bad. I need to get an attorney. And, I started a process that went on for over 10 years. The craziest thing about this, I decided to separate, and we immediately got into massive fights with lawyers. There was so much money involved. There was so much in between, and small children, and their mother decided eventually to move to another city. I had to drive 3.5 hours to see my kids. I didn't even have joint custody. I had them every other weekend, so I would drive 3.5 hours, pick them up, drive them back so that they could spend time with me, and then drive them back on Sunday night. Yeah, it was totally insane. And I was just lost in my life. I had my clinic, I went from over 800 clients a week to under 100. My business dropped tenfold in about 3 years. And yet all of my financial responsibilities were based on the higher income. So it was a tough time. And in that journey, I was just looking, how do I be a father? I'm in a foreign country. I have no family here. When we separated, my entire social structure was this Spanish family. It was my children's mother's family. And, when there's a separation, families stick together, and this family stuck together, and I wasn't a part of it. And so, I literally had nowhere to turn. So what I did was, I immediately got into another relationship with another woman who was actually a client of mine. And she was going through a separation, and she had this amazingly beautiful 3-year-old daughter who the daughter and I just fell in love with each other the day we met. A little 3-year-old girl who needed a father. And here I am, a father needing a child. I was seeing my kids maybe 4 days a month. So, I started in this cycle. I was actually just repeating a pattern. And I didn't see it. And what I didn't realize was that I was actually told that this was going to happen years before. When I graduated from university, from chiropractic school in 1996, so just to let you know, I was born in 1969. This year I turned 54. So I graduated from chiropractic school in 1996, and I took my first job in Guatemala. And I had a small studio in Antigua, Guatemala. And my clinic was actually called Artlist Centro Quiropráctico. And my clinic in Spain for 23 years was called Artlist Centro Quiropráctico, based on Lake Atitlan, because I used to go up there a lot. I used to spend a lot of time up on Lake Atitlan. So I was living in Guatemala, and I was dating this beautiful young woman named Diane from California. And one day we had actually left Antigua. We were living in Guatemala City, and I was called to see a client back to Antigua. I went back to Antigua to go visit this client, and Diane and I were walking down this side street, and we were actually having a discussion about something. And then when all the shops were closed, and we see this sign, and it was a little art store, and it had all these cool paintings outside, and had a sign said like 3 for 1, today's special or whatever. And Diane stopped and was looking at some paintings by some local artists. And what really struck my attention, I looked in and I saw one of the coolest looking guy I'd ever seen. There was at the back of the art store, it was basically a converted garage. At the back of the art store, there was an old architect's drawing table, wood and metal, like with a hand crank to change the angle. Really old. It was really nice, but you could tell it was old. And behind it, there was sitting this guy, and he had long black hair down to his waist, and jet black hair. Obviously, he was native, and he had a sleeve cut off T-shirt on, and he had all of these red beads. Later, I found out they were seeds, and he had just 10 of these bracelets on each wrist, and then he had another 10 around his neck. And I was just kind of enthralled by the image of this guy. It looked so cool, so authentic. So I walk in, and he's bent over the desk, and he's doing some work, and I see a sign, and it says, "Your Mayan horoscope for free." And I'm looking at it, and he looks up, and he says, "Do you know what I'm doing?" And I said, yeah. No, he said, "Do you know what this is?" And I said, "Yeah. That's a more Mayan hieroglyphs, Mayan horoscope." And I'd seen it. I'd been in Guatemala now for almost a year. And he said, "Yeah, but do you know what it is?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I'm a know-it-all." I was like, and he was like, "Do you want to know why you're here?" And I said, "No, we're just kind of walking through." And he said, "No, do you want to know why you're here?" And he looked me in the eyes, and I was like, "Sure." And he said, "Give me your name, date of birth, and place of birth, and I'll do your horoscope." I was like, "Okay." So I gave it to him. I gave him Diane's, and he said, "Okay, come back tomorrow." And so we left. And we didn't go back. Forgot about it, went back to the city. We were in the city another 2 months. Diane ended up getting a job in San Francisco or LA. She got a job in LA, and she went to LA, and I stayed behind. And I get another call to go back to Antigua from another client. And this time, it was a woman who ran a luxury boutique hotel. I believe she was from Holland. She had heard about my work through a mutual friend, a man by the name of Uli Ulrich, he was my meditation master, and he lived on the lake in Guatemala. And Uli was a very special man. He was German, and she was a friend of his, and he had given her my number. And she had called me in Guatemala City, and she was having really bad sciatica. And she said, Uli told me about your work, and if you'll come see me, I'll pay for your taxi. I'll and she was, I was just like looking at earning $100, which is, that was good for me. And so I actually took a chicken bus from Guatemala City back to Antigua so I could save the money on the taxi. Because I didn't want to spend that money. I wanted to keep it. I needed the money. So, and I had to take a bus early in the morning, and I got there like 2 hours before she told me that she would receive me at her hotel. So I just started walking around the town, walking around Antigua. And I'm walking down the street, and all of a sudden I stumble across this shop, and it's open. And the same guy's sitting there. So I walk in, and I'm like, hey, man, you're not going to remember me. I was here a couple of months ago, and you did my horoscope. And I would like to, I don't know if you have it or not. And he said, yeah, I keep all of them. I never throw them away. And I was like, okay. And he said, just look through the stack. And there was this big stack on the corner of the drawing table. He said, they're all by date. He said, and, if there's 6 June 1st, then it's by year. He said, but it's all by date. But, so just find the day of the month that you were born in, and it'll be together with anybody else that was born on that day. So I go through the stack, and it was a big stack of papers. I go through the stack, and it's not there. And I was like, well, no, it's not here. You probably don't have it. And he said, no. He said, this is my lineage. This is my heritage. I do not throw these away. He said, when's your birthday? And I said, well, it's August 9th, 1969. And he kind of sat up and like, August 9th, 1969. I said, yeah. And he's like, hang on a second. And he stops what he's doing, and he reaches behind him, and he grabs this leather binder, and he pulls out a much smaller stack of papers. And he says, so he ruffles through it, and he actually pulls out 2 pieces of paper, and they're like typing paper size. And he lays them face down. And he says, okay. He said, and he hands me the stack, the big stack again. He said, so in the top left corner is the date of birth. In the top right corner, there was a number written down. And he said, I want you to go through this stack, and I want you to pick the highest number that you find. And so I start flipping through all of them, and they were, everything was like in the 60s, low 70s. They were all more like 62, 68, 69, 70, 72. And I came across one, and it was 76. And I pull it out, and then he says, and he comes around from behind the table, and he actually walked up and shut the doors. And I was like, now you've got my attention. And he said, my ancestry, we practice the art of Mayan horoscope. And my mentors taught me this style. And in our style of reading the Mayan horoscope, you have a set number of guardian angels that are born with you on your date of birth, and they travel with you through your life. And that number goes from 56 to 86. And he said, and your life mission will be determined by the number of nahuales, or guardian angels, that were assigned to you on your date of birth. And he said, so most people you see have between 60 and 70, somewhere in there. And, it's a good number. And he said, a potato farmer who just needs to live a good life can have a good life, and he'll have maybe 60 nahuales. And he said, now, great spiritual masters, a Buddha, a Gandhi, a Jesus, a Mary, he said, these people are going to need 86. I mean, they're going to have all of them. And so he flips over the sheet of paper, and there's 81 written in red in the corner. And I was like, wow. And he said, this is the horoscope of the daughter of two lineages of shamans from Guatemala. It was an arranged marriage, and this is their third child. And they knew that they were going to have a child that was going to bring these two shamanic lineage together. And this young lady she was like a year old, and they ran her horoscope, and they did her score horoscope, and they said, and it's 81. So we know that because of her horoscope, she is the child that they were waiting on, and she's the one that both lineages are going to pass the knowledge on to. And I was like, okay, cool. And he said, this is the highest I've ever seen. And it was the highest I've ever seen until 2 months ago when I saw this one. And he flipped the other one over, and in the corner in red was written 83. And I was like, wow, 83. And he said, yeah. And I was like, wow, that's pretty cool. And then I looked over and I was like, wow, this person has the same date of birth as me. And he said, yeah, it is you. And I was like, what? And he said, yeah. He said, I've been waiting for you to come back. And he told me a story. He said, listen, he said, you are a bridge. He said, the world's sick, man. He said, the world's really sick. And he said, the world is sick with greed and corruption and consumerism and all of this stuff. And he said, and it's the white world, it's your world that's sick. And he said, in our world, the red path, the indigenous path, we can help them, but they won't listen to us. They won't listen to us. We're just stupid Indians, stupid natives, and they don't want to listen to us. He said, but they'll listen to you because you're one of them. He said, so you've been sent to us to learn how to heal and to how to help the planet. And he said, I'm going to need to send you to San Francisco el Alto to study with my teacher, Don Pedro, for 400 days. And I was like, yeah, right. Yeah, and your commission is, yeah, what do you get, a 20% kickback? I was like, yeah, whatever. And so I looked at my watch. I was like, oh, dude, I got to go see this client. And he was like, no, man, come back. This is serious shit. Come back. And I was like, no, I got to go see this woman. And I walked off and I just kind of folded the paper up, stuck it in my pocket. And I was like, yeah, whatever. It's a great way to sell paintings and t-shirts. So I make my way over to this woman's hotel, and it's this beautiful small boutique hotel. And I go in, and there's a little reception area with a really nice gift shop. Beautiful little indigenous girl there. You've been to Guatemala, you've seen it. They're so beautiful with their, the regional costumes on. And she spoke perfect English. Oh, hello, sir, may I help you? And, I was like, yeah, I'm waiting to see Doña Elena. And she said, oh yeah, she's in the back. She's with someone. She told me, to tell you to wait when you got here. And so I was like, okay. And so I'm just standing there. And she was like, yeah, if you need any help with anything, just let me know. And so I'm standing, I'm thinking, I stick my hand in my pocket and I feel this piece of paper. And I was like, hey, I pull it out and I say, do you know anything about Mayan horoscopes? And she smiled and she was like, no, I don't. She said, but Doña Elena right now is with her shaman who came from San Francisco el Alto to do her horoscope. And I look back across this beautiful indoor courtyard, which, everyone who's been to Guatemala knows these hotels with these beautiful indoor courtyards. And there's this amazing indigenous woman, and it's just like staring at me. Like I can feel her gaze burning through me. And she's with this older, obviously European woman. And so I'm like, wow, that's got to be her. So, about 5-10 minutes go by, and they get up and they give each other a hug, and the indigenous woman starts to walk out. And so the European woman, obviously this Helen woman, she sees me and she waves me over. So I'm walking back down the little corridor, and I'm going to cross face to face with this indigenous woman. And as I walk up to her, I stop her, and she looks me right in the eyes and she says, how can I help you? And I said, I was told you know something about Mayan horoscopes. And she said, yeah. And I said, can you tell me anything about this? And I handed it to her, and she looked at it, And she said, where did you get this? And I told her, and she was like, oh yeah, okay. And I said, do you know this guy? And I don't remember his name. I call him Jose, but I don't remember his name. And I was like, do you know Jose or whoever, whatever his name was? And she was like, yeah, I know him. And I said, yeah, he gave this to me. And she looked at it and she said, is this your date of birth? And I said, yeah. And she said, you need to go to San Francisco Alto. And I was like, wow, that's just what he told me. And she's like, he's right. You need to go. And she walked off. And I was like, yeah, okay. And so I walked back, go see this woman, and I work on her. And she's like, what was that all about? And I told her, I said, well, I met this guy, and Jose Ramon, that was his name, Jose Ramon. And he gave me this horoscope, and I'm not too sure if it's real or not. And I was just asking her. And this woman, Helena, she said, well, what did she say? And I said, well, she told me the same thing. And she said, look, I know that guy. And if it was just him, he sees a lot of tourists, she said, but if she told you that, she said, that woman's the real deal. She said, I brought her in on a 6-hour, 7-hour bus ride. I paid her to come read my horoscope today. This is who she is. This is what she does. This is her lineage. She said, if she said it, you've got to go. And this was 400 days. I'm supposed to go for 400 days. So I'm trying to wrap my head around this. And my parents had just gotten separated back in the States. So I call my mom and I'm telling her this story. My mom freaks out. She calls my dad, and they were in the middle of a divorce. So imagine how freaked out she was to call my dad. And she's like, your son is about to disappear into the Guatemalan jungle for 400 days. My dad gets on a plane the next day and flies to Guatemala to come say like, hey, what's up? To talk me out of this. So dad comes and he's just like, you're not going to the jungle for 400 days. What are you doing? You've got student loans. You got to go make money. You need to get back to the States. You need to get a job. And we spend the day together, spend the evening together. The next day, Dad and I go at lunchtime to have a couple beers. And who walks in the door? Jose Ramon with his mentor. They walk in the door to the cantina that we're sitting in. And he sees me. And he says to his mentor, that's him. That's the guy. And they walk over and they sit down with us. His mentor doesn't speak any English. Luckily, Jose Ramon spoke good English. And his mentor told my father why I should go to the jungle with them for 400 days. And my father said yes. He said yes. He convinced my father. So my father said, before you go, I want to ask you one thing. Come home and see your mother. Come back a couple of weeks, see your mother before you go. I was like, okay, I can do that. So I'm looking for tickets, trying to get a ticket back to the States, but there's just still a doubt in my head. Should I do this or not? And I'm like, who do I need to talk to? Who do I need to talk to? I'm like, Mom, I need to talk to Uli, my meditation teacher who lives on Lake Atitlan. He's like one of the wisest men I know. So I take the long bus ride from Antigua out to Lake Atitlan, and I go to see Uli. And, this guy is just, I know that people are going to hear this that have been on the lake and they might know Uli, and he is such a character. He's a Aikido master. I think he's a sixth dan of Aikido, and he lives on this property where they rehabilitate endangered species. And he and his wife, Marianne, they're from Austria. And they've got this open air Aikido dojo that has a waterfall behind it, falling onto the property with these Japanese open air Zen paper wall houses. It's something out of a movie. So I went to see him, and we go back to his meditation studio, and I tell him the story, and he goes into deep meditation, and he's there about 10 or 15 minutes, and he looks at me and he says, Aaron, everything they're telling you is true. He said, I've known you for about 9 months now. And since the day I met you, I knew that there was something very special about you. So I have no doubt what they're saying to you and what you need to do. There's no doubt that it's true. He said, but I do not think you should go. He said, I don't think you should go. And I said, why not? And he said, because if you go, when you come out in 400 days, you're just going to be another 28-year-old hippie that nobody wants to listen to. He said, Aaron, if you want to change the world, you need to understand the world. And if you want to heal the sickness of the world, you got to get sick with the sickness of the world. And he said, so my advice to you is go get sick. He said, leave Guatemala now. Go and get that high-paying job. Go build that career. Go buy those cars and those houses and make that money and have that fun and have that sex and do all of those things. He said, and do it to the extreme, to the best that you can. He said, and one day you're going to be so lost in this world that you're going to want to die. He said, you're going to want to die. And he said, and that's when the healing is going to begin. Your healing. And I said, oh, wow. And then there'll be some type of change. Then it'll get better. He said, no. Then it'll get worse. And he said something to me that was so funny. He said, remember, it's a lot more fun and a lot faster to catch a venereal disease than to treat one. And he said, so you're going to want to die. He said, you're going to get immersed into this. And he said, then your healing is going to begin, and it's going to be long and it's going to be painful because you're going to start to strip away all of those things that you thought were so important to you in life. And that's what happened. That's what happened. All of these things that I thought were so important were getting ripped away from me. They were getting ripped away from me. They were getting ripped away from me. And before I left, one of the last things he said to me, and I was like, wow, that sounds like fun. I was like, and how long is that going to last? And he said, you'll know. He said, you'll know. And I was like, well, how am I going to know? And he said, you're going to feel a calling, and you're going to know it's time to start teaching. You're going to know. You're going to know. And so that day 20 years ago in May was what he had told me. I wanted to die. And I started on a 10-year healing process that took me through another marriage. It took me on some really good times. I was married to two amazing women, and God bless them, amazing women. And I wasn't happy. It wasn't me. I was locked into a system. I was just make money, go on trips, buy new shoes every other week, fancy clothes, whose name's on my underwear. And I just knew in my core that was not me. It wasn't me. And so I was in my second marriage, 10 years into my second marriage, 9 years into my second marriage. And I was just again unhappy. My kids had gotten older. I was really proud of that I had stuck it out, and I had stayed because when this happened, I really, I wanted to do what so many people wanted to do. I wanted to leave. So many of us were like, screw it, I'll just go to India and live in a cave. That doesn't serve anyone. A wise hermit in a cave is good for the wise hermit. He's not really good for anybody else. And so, I really stayed in Spain for my kids. I wanted to be near my kids, and I wanted to make sure they got a good education. And So I was like deep into my second marriage. I was repeating the same pattern. I wasn't happy. I wasn't where I wanted to be. And I had started a program working with kids with ADHD and hyperactivity, Asperger's, and autism. And I was at a neurological conference with this amazing neurologist, and I was in Milan. And we were on a break, and we were having coffee, and I walked over and I was speaking to this doctor. And we were just having a chat, and my second wife was having a health issue, and I wanted his opinion on it. And I was asking him if he thought, this neurological work we did could help her. And he's looking at me kind of strange. And he was like, I don't know if I can help her or not, but who I really need to help is you. And I said, why? And he said, look how bad your hand shakes. And I knew I had a shake in my hand, but I didn't realize how bad it was. And I had this tremor in my right hand that, sometimes I still have it today, not nearly what it used to be, but it was really visible. And I was like, yeah, he said, how long have you had that? And I was like, a couple of years. Is it important? And he said, only if you think Parkinson's is important. And I was like, what? He said, yeah. He said, if you don't do something about that, that could be the first stage of Parkinson's. Dude, I was 43 years old, man. 44. I was like, what? It blew me away. I didn't hear another word the whole conference. That's all I heard. I was like, is this dude's telling me I'm going to have Parkinson's? So I go back to Spain and just with this echo in my head, and a month goes by and I've got to go back to Milan for another conference. And I'm at the conference. Friday night, the conference ends and me and a couple of doctors go have a beer. We're sitting at this Irish pub in Milan, makes a lot of sense. And we're having a pint. And all of a sudden, this doctor from Holland says, Aaron, your hand, you're shaking. And I was like, yeah, what's up? He says, no, it just started. And I was like, what? And he said, no, it just started. And another doctor said, I think I know why. I think I know why. And I said, why? He said, for the last 30 minutes, you've been telling us jokes. Because I love to tell jokes. This is something I inherited from my father. I just love to tell jokes and have a photographic memory, and I can remember really funny jokes. And so I was telling these jokes, and he said, you were telling us these jokes and you weren't shaking. But for the last 10 minutes, you've been talking about your problems with your wife. He said, I think that's your problem. And I realized, I said, this stress is killing me again. Again. And that's when I realized, man, it's time. It's time. And, I made a really, really tough decision for the second time, it was to get my second divorce. And, I was just, I've got to live my life. I've got to be me. And I moved into a tiny little apartment and started spending more time with my kids, and our relationship started getting really, really healthy. And, I went and saw a massage therapist that, and this is a whole nother story for a whole nother chapter, that my spiritual teacher, a gentleman by the name of Tom Heckel, had recommended me to go see. I knew who this woman was. I had met her at one of his seminars. And I went and saw this woman because I was just so stressed out. And she turned out to be one of the most amazing healers that I've ever met in my life. And she helped me start seeing that my cycle of healing was coming to an end, and that it was time for me to step up. And it was time for me to really start reaching out to the world and start becoming who I was told over 20 years ago that I was supposed to be. And that woman's my wife now, Maria. So, yeah. Interesting side note to that. January of last year, I went back to Guatemala for 3 weeks to walk around the lake. And I found my old teacher. He's 85 years old. And I found his house. I went in. The old dojo's still there, just had a ping pong table on it. And the worker went in. He came out. He didn't remember me. He didn't remember me. And his wife came out, and she remembered me right away. She remembered me. Oh my God, Aaron, the chiropractor. And so she sat down and explained to him. And they said, what are you doing? What are you doing back? And I said, I came back to thank you. I said, 20 years ago, you told me that I needed to go get sick. And I just came back to tell you that I'm better. So thank you, Uli. And that is my suicide story.
Holy shit, man. I mean, what the fuck?
Oh, that was incredible. Oh.
I want to transition into a conversation and give you just some shares from my end. Oh my God. First of all, I just cannot believe you in 1969 and a shaman ranks you, what is it, 3 points off from Christ?
Yeah, it was something like that.
You're an 83 and Christ comes in with 87.
I'm sure Christ was higher than that.
Okay, but
yeah.
whatever, right?
Yeah,
like the
yeah,
point is that like you're just this dude who's like, oh, whatever to whatever he's about to tell you. And he's like, no, you got to go to this day, 400 days. And I just couldn't believe what your mentor then went and told you. That was such a twist for me where I was just like, whoa.
Yeah. I mean, I was a kid, bro. I was 28 years old and
Wow.
yeah. I mean, I was just a kid.
Like me, I'm 27. I can't believe that story.
Yeah. And I was just, the funny thing about it is now, I was just back on the lake a year ago in January. And I mean, when I was there was no electricity on the lake.
It's different.
What? When I was there, I had met a woman, and she was a folk singer. She had actually like opened for Joni Mitchell, some stuff like this in the early 70s. And her name was Terry. And she had a tree house, this beautiful tree house in this little tiny village that had like 8 houses, and it was called San Marcos. Wow. And so, I mean, if you've been to the lake, you see San Marcos now. It's like the tourist hub.
Wow.
Yeah, it's like, they call it the hippie highway. And I remember she had this tree house back in the woods, and we had to get off the boat and walk through this trail to get to this tree house. And so when I went back in January last year, and I stayed at one of the 50 hotels in San Marcos, I went down to the beach one morning, and I was doing, some meditation, and I saw this old hippie woman with just, really cool looking gray hair. She just looked like she'd been on the lake forever. And she was with her dog, and she saw me, and we smiled at each other. And I walked over to her and I said, hey, let me ask you a question. Have you been here for a long time? She's like, I've been living on this lake for 20 years. And I said, I had this friend I knew like 20 years ago, and she had this tree house like way out in the woods. And her name was Terry. And would you know her? And she was like, Terry's tree house is right up that street. And it was a hotel. Everything had been built around it.
Wow.
Yeah. It was. I was walking past it every day.
Oh my God.
Not even realizing the lake had gotten that big and that busy.
Yeah. Dude, I want to take a moment to emphasize this aspect of what it means to be a bridge.
Yeah.
Okay, so what does that mean?
Wow.
Because I feel that for you so strongly.
Yeah.
And the way that you can speak is so incredible. And the aspects of consciousness that you've gone through, you literally mastered the blueprint. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it's, what does it mean to now be a bridge?
For me, being a bridge means being able to help people across on their journey. If we think back to the stories, of the great spiritual leaders, we think back specifically to the story of Christ. Forgive them, Father. They know not what they do. Let me go for them. And that's a bridge. I mean, that's the ultimate bridge.
Wow. I love that example.
Yeah. And it's like, we don't have to get nailed to a cross, but maybe we got to go through some shit. And, if I can live things in my life and learn from those things and turn those into spiritual awareness in my own life, and then I can look back and see people that want to come across and yet don't know how, and I can help them not make the same mistake that I made, that's being a bridge. That's being a bridge.
Dude, tell me, so another beautiful transition, tell me about time for time.
Wow. So time for time is a concept that is just being born recently. Living here on the beach, you really never know who you're working with. I have a studio here, and I've been a chiropractor for 25 years. So people, I've got two former students of mine have a great chiropractic clinic, and yet I still some people reach out to me for chiropractic care. Most people reach out to me for counseling, coaching, mentoring, and you never know who you're going to be with. Maybe it's somebody that is making $600 a month, or maybe it's the owner of that hotel who makes $6 million a year. You never know, because everyone's dressed the same. Everyone's wearing flip-flops and shorts. And I just got to this point of just being tired of, how much do you charge? How much you ask for? And so just thinking about it, I was actually speaking with my good friend Joshua, and we were speaking about this concept. And it's like, wow, we can have so much impact on someone's life so quickly in just a few hours. How do you charge for that?
Yeah.
What do you do with that?
Yeah.
I have clients here who charge $500 an hour, and they're clients of mine. What do I charge them? $800 an hour? What do you do? So I said, you know what? I'm going to give you the absolute best of me, the absolute best in the capacity that you need. And that's my time. And in return, you're going to give me your time. But that your time is an acronym, TIME. And that stands for Transformational Impact Monetary Exchange. Transformational Impact Monetary Exchange. How much did the time that I spent with you impact your life?
Wow.
I had a young man come see me yesterday, and in an hour and a half, we worked through something that he hadn't hit in 2 years of psychotherapy.
Wow.
And we did it in an hour and a half. And that was 2 days ago. And we met again today, and he was like, I don't know what to give you. I said, just for whatever feels right, I was like,
Yeah.
And, I said, he was like, do you want me to do something? I was like, well, at the end of the day, this is how I pay my rent. So, I prefer that it be a monetary exchange. And he was like, give me some guidelines, Yeah. And I said, well, I have people who work here, and $20 is a lot for them.
Yeah.
And I've worked with some other people who've given me $1,000 for an hour and a half.
Yeah.
There's your guidelines. You know, what feels right for you?
Yeah.
And whatever feels right for you is going to feel right for me, because I know that I'm taken care of. I know that when I am of service, all of my needs are met. And the craziest thing in the world is, you know, ever since this concept was born, I've got people calling me that I haven't expected to call me.
Oh.
This is the second show I've been invited on in 2 weeks.
Oh my God.
And I know it is directly related to
Yeah.
this. It's directly related.
You've really, when you first told me about this, it was only a few days ago, a couple of days ago,
Yeah,
maybe.
Yeah.
I feel it's heart-based exchange. It's the same concept, but like, it's just like, give me what you feel it's worth.
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, yes, this is how I pay my rent. So some type of monetary fiat, whatever, has to be something like this. I see that as such a bridge moment already, because you're giving someone the opportunity to get out of their mind and feel into their heart, what was that worth to me? What can I give? It doesn't come from a price on a menu that they selected prior to the session with you, where you worked through whatever you worked through. And this is the most beautiful aspect of pricing, call it what you will, that you could ever offer. And I feel so strongly that it is the way. It is this beautiful bridge to call it the new way of how you would conduct your service offering. I think it's beautiful to charge a price and do all that too. But I actually feel like you have such courage and faith in God when you adopt this style of charging and pricing.
It's scary.
I fucking know. I can't even imagine.
It's scary. It's scary, you know. And you and I spoke about this the other day. You know, I don't have a big safety net. I mean, you know, after, you know, all of this, the end of the story, I mean, that was 8 years ago.
Yeah.
And, you know, I mean, I was in complete bankruptcy 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Bankruptcy. And so, you know, just, you know, being able to not have this big safety net and say, I'm just going to trust. I'm just going to trust. I'm just going to trust. And, you know, actually, you know, I really have to thank my wife, Maria, for this, because Maria,
she's the best.
Yeah, she's
oh my God.
Yeah, she's amazing. And she, you know, she leads ceremonies dedicated to healing Pachamama. And she does these absolutely gorgeous, she channels them, you know, hours and hours designing them in her head and creating them with flowers and fruits and just absolutely beautiful work. And yet she was the first one that said, I can't ask money for this.
Yeah.
She said, I'm working with Pachamama. I'm working with Mother Earth. I cannot ask money.
Oh, so special.
Yeah, yeah. And so her mentor, Mama Maria, who's in the mountains of Peru, said, you know, the people who ask you to come and do this on their land, they can make a monetary offering to Mother Earth through you.
Yeah.
But you cannot put a price on it.
Oh.
And, you know, as I sat in that and listened to that and reflected on that, I was like, you know, Aaron, when you sit down with someone and, you know, you tell your story, this is not my story. This is God's story.
Yeah.
This is my contract with something so much bigger than me. And I just get to be the one lucky enough to tell it and lucky enough to be able to articulate it in a way. And, you know, I'm a great storyteller, and I know that, and I have been since I was a kid. And, you know, to be able to weave those stories into a way that can inspire someone to make a change in their life so that they can find a new path across that bridge.
Oh, so special.
Yeah, that really makes it worth the while. And the funny thing about it is, you know, this week the clients that I've brought this to have been responding above my standard prices.
Of course. Oh my God.
Yeah, they've been responding above what I would usually ask for.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the guy, a couple of people came in and they just gave the best that they had, and it felt great.
There's this beautiful story. Christ is with his disciples, and there's a bunch of people walking in the temple, and they're donating to the church or the synagogue, whatever it is. Some wealthy people walk in, they donate a lot of money in the basket. Other people, a lot of money. Poor old lady walks in. She puts in like 3 cents, and Jesus looks at his disciples and says, "Did you see that? She gave more than everyone else."
Oh yeah.
And they said, "What do you mean?" That was all she had.
Mm-hmm.
And that is just the feeling that I get with this style that you're conducting to be of service to mankind.
Yeah.
It's super special.
Thank you.
And I also just want to touch on that, man. So what do you do, man? I mean, I've done a session with you, and you did some adjustments to me as a chiro, but then we went into a whole lot of other stuff that was super special and untraditional. So what does it look like when someone, how does this look? Someone is dealing with a problem. I feel like you deal with an infinite range of people because you've gone through, like, you've almost gone through the infinite range of life in this typical blueprint. And so I feel like you can help so many people with so many different things. The multidimensionality to you is like, what does it look like? Somebody comes to you, and what does your process look like?
Yeah, I mean, it's actually changed quite a bit. Most of the people I do meet face to face. Lately, I have had more people like reaching out that have heard about the work and reaching out online. But usually, people will find me. They'll come see me in Banal. And, the process that I call a line of dance life navigation, body, spirit, mind. The first thing we're going to do is look at the body because, the physical body is the last place where your symptom is going to show up, and it's the first place where it's going to go away.
Wow.
So, we are energetic beings. We are the manifestation of energy. So before something becomes physical, there's an interruption in the field. Energetically, it's happening in the field.
Yeah.
And so, being a chiropractor, I was active for 23 years, and I was able to do over 500,000 individual sessions.
That's insane.
And so
That's incredible.
So when you do over 500,000 sessions, you begin to see patterns and you begin to understand the body.
Yeah.
And so I can see someone's body and I can feel their patterns. And as I feel into that pattern, I know that I am here to hold the space for them for healing. And from the moment they walk into my studio till the moment they walk out, they know that they're being held in safety. They know that they're being held in safety. And so for a lot of people, that's the first time that they've really felt safe.
Oh, that's so special.
Yeah, like really, really safe. So, imagine you come in with, right shoulder pain.
Yeah.
And you're trying to figure it out, and you've been to the physios and you've been to the doctors and you've taken the pills and you've done everything. You've probably been to chiropractors and everything else.
Yeah.
And, the right side of the body, the masculine side of the body, everybody knows, a lot of people know that. And yet what most people don't know is that the shoulder, this is where we carry the weight of the world.
Wow.
We're carrying it on our shoulders.
Yeah.
And so what you're carrying in that right shoulder is what you think you're supposed to be doing.
Wow.
And are you doing it right?
Whoa.
And so this person comes in and they're talking about, and they're telling me their diagnosis and all of their stuff.
Yeah.
And so we get them on the table and we go into that. And, I do a process that I call sacred mirroring, where I look right into their eyes and hold that gaze in their eyes and begin telling them what I'm feeling from their body.
Whoa.
And, and you can't hide. You can't hide. When someone's staring you in your eyes and they're telling you what they know is going on,
Yeah.
there's no space to hide it. And it's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay.
It's safe.
It's safe here. You're safe here.
Yeah.
You can let this go.
Whoa.
And that's usually when the barrier breaks. That's when the veil drops. And for a lot of people, it's the first time in ever or in many, 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 many years that they can open up their heart in a safe space and say, yes, that's what's going on. You know, I'm lost in my life. I hate my job. I'm in a bad marriage. I'm dealing with parents that drive me crazy. And we can give them that space. And then what we do is, you know, we let them know that that's just a story.
Yeah.
That's just a story that you're telling.
Oh.
And you can change that story.
Yeah.
And that story that you're telling, it was actually created by your wounded inner child.
Oh, wow.
Your wounded inner child who was scared and was just trying to survive, created that story to survive.
Yeah.
And you started doing all of those things because that's what you thought you should do to be loved and accepted in your family. And you've been doing it since you were 3, 4, 5, 6 years old.
Yeah.
And now you're 37, 46.
Yeah.
And you've got this pains and you're lost in your life, even though you've got a high 6-figure income.
Yeah.
Your body's telling you what's going on.
Yeah.
And so, you know, we work with them and get them to have a conversation with that inner child and literally go back and tell that inner child a new story.
Oh.
And say, look, no, you're going to make it through this. Yeah, you're going to make it through this. You're going to be okay. And one day I'm going to come back and get you.
Oh.
And together we're going to make it out of this. Yeah.
That must feel so good for someone who hasn't been able to step into that.
It's powerful. It's powerful. You know, for me, it's amazing to watch. And I get to see this, you know, on a weekly basis, and it's beautiful. It's life-changing.
Yeah.
It's life-changing.
And, you know, man, Playa Vanau is a small beach. There's not many people that maybe, let's say, live here.
Yeah.
A lot of people come through here. I love you so much. I'm just like so happy that you live here.
Oh, man.
Every time I see you, I'm just like, thank God Aaron lives here. Thank you, Lord, for this,
no.
for
And we're the
this
same way.
other being. And Claudia feels the same. She's like, babe, you know, I love Aaron so much.
You guys are beautiful.
Like, we had such a good conversation today. This is today. You know, and this happens several times.
Yeah.
She's like, I just feel so received by him. And she actually used these specific words. She said, I feel so seen by him. And it feels so good.
Okay, I'm going to get emotional now because I'm going to share something now. You got me on the couch and on the spot. Okay, you
Give
ready?
it to me.
Okay, this is going to be a tough one to get through. Claudia reminds me of my daughter,
Oh, dude, that's so special.
and I don't get to see my daughter as much as I'd like to. And when Claudia or any of these young ladies on the beach, and there's so many beautiful young ladies and young men on this beach, and my journey has led me away from my children because I knew that just Spain was not my place and I needed to go. And I do miss my children. I miss my children a lot. And, I've got such a beautiful relationship with my children. And yet when I see, someone like Claudia on the beach who's just such love and joy and pure energy, and I know all of you are far away from your parents, and I just was like, what would I say to my daughter if she were here? And most of the time it was, I would just want to listen to her. I just want to spend time with her. I just want to listen to her. And so today, we're sitting at the Casa Venal coffee shop, and I just had a moment to sit on the couch and sit there with Claudia and look into her eyes and just see this beautiful young woman who's on such a beautiful trail, such a path moving forward. And, and it's just, all I can pray is that somewhere in Spain, someone's sitting on a couch and giving good advice to my daughter and to my son. And so the way I can pay that forward is by giving it to somebody else's son and daughter.
That's so special. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Claudia's going to cry when she hears this. She's going to cry when she hears this because she feels it, man. Yeah. And I feel it from her when she shares it with me. I'm like, yeah, babe, I'm glad we're on the same page with this one because he's special. Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you something funny about you that you don't know either.
Okay.
So Claudia's Claudia, but my wife and I have a nickname for you.
Okay. What is it?
You're Ken.
Oh, I'm Ken.
Yeah.
Okay.
So when I told my wife I was coming here today, I said, I'm so excited. She said, why? I said, I'm going to do an interview with Ken. And the reason why you're Ken, my wife, and my wife doesn't speak English, and she's so funny. She's from the mountains of Colombia, and she gives everybody a nickname.
Yeah.
And she's like, this kid, he's so cute. He looks like a Ken doll.
Oh my God.
She's like, he looks just like a perfect little Ken doll.
Oh my God.
And so that since that day, that was like last year.
That's so funny.
Yeah, that was like last year. And because last year we were at Casablanca.
Yeah,
At Casablanca, hanging out, and that's when we all kind of really met.
Yeah.
And we had gone home, and she was just like, oh my God, these people they're so great and they're so amazing. And I was like, yeah, and I was talking to Taylor, and she was like, who? And I said, Taylor. She's like, who? And I said, the blonde-headed guy. And she said, Ken? I was like, no, it's Taylor. And she said, it's Ken. I was like, okay.
That's so fucking funny.
It's Ken.
Oh my God.
It's Ken. Yeah. So.
I really love that story, man.
Now you know.
So grateful. It's not the first time someone said that. I'm very appreciative of the body that was gifted in this life. I'm like,
yeah. Hey, they could call you Stretch Armstrong or the other. Yeah.
There's many other names.
Yeah, there's a lot.
I've received
Cabbage Patch Kid.
I've received a lot of names.
Yeah, I have two. Trust me, I've been through 2 divorces.
Yeah, I've made it through to the better phases of life where the names are good and
they're getting better,
more angelic. Man, well, this was so fucking special, man. And something really beautiful I want to do is put something in the show notes where people can, if they feel inspired, to reach out and connect with you, where they can connect with you. So I'm gonna put your Instagram in there. I'm going to maybe put some type of calendar link if you have like an online booking link, if people want to do a time for time session with you. So special. And if they can come here to Playa Venal and see this, because we're in your studio, man. Yeah. This is really special that we got to do it in the studio.
Yeah. Reach out. This is why I'm here. This is what I do. I'm just now... I'm about to tie the horse to the post for 5 days.
Oh, that's a good story.
Yeah, can I tell that
story?
Yeah,
tell that story real quick. I love that, man.
So, just as a teacher and as a speaker, I used to give a lot more class. And since these last 3 years, I've really stepped away from it. And here on the beach, so many people have reached out to me. And especially, your generation, everybody's into social media.
Yeah.
And I've just got this social media phobia.
Yeah.
And it really is just because, I just don't know it.
Yeah.
And so many people have reached out and said, you got to get into this. You need to use
I've
the word.
told you many times.
Many times. And so the other day, when I reached out to you and I was like, I've got to do this. Yeah. And I'm scared to death about it. So you told me this story, and I love this story. And you were telling me, you said, Aaron, do you know how the Amish or the Amish, how they get their horses to not be afraid of traffic? And so if anybody listening to this don't know, if you Google the Amish, this is a spiritual community that lives in the United States. Most of them live around Pennsylvania. and they don't use any technology. They don't use computers. They don't use electricity. And they go in horse and buggy, and they go down the highway, like 4-lane highways.
Yeah.
And I've seen them. We have some in Tennessee. And I've always wondered, how do those horses not get scared to death 18-wheelers driving by? And so you told me that when the horse is really young, just maybe a couple months old, they take the horse to the highway and they tie it to a street sign and they give it food and water and they leave it for 5 days.
Yeah.
And when they come back, the horse is no longer scared of traffic.
Yeah.
And it just hit me, and I was like, damn it.
Gotta tie myself to that
I'm gonna
sign.
have to tie myself to that sign. So I just, today, I ordered my new iPhone and the new mic that you told me to get.
Oh, so excited.
I told my wife this morning, I said, when this comes in,
I'm showing up.
I'm
on the highway.
I'm tied. I'm tied to the highway, baby. I'm tied to the highway.
Yeah.
So, I'll be getting some more teaching and some more information out. But anyone who feels a need, who feels a calling, please, reach out.
Yeah.
And we can have a drop in.
Yeah.
Maybe just 15, 20 minutes just to feel if it vibes, and if it vibes and it feels good. And please, if you're in Playa Now, if you come to Playa Now, come by, say hi. Come up to the cafe, swing by.
Yeah.
Come by the Voice Center.
I'll put those in the show notes too. I'll put Casa Now and I'll link the Voice Center in this place.
Yeah. So and we're here.
We are here.
Ramdas, we here now. We are here now.
We are here now.
Excellent.
Dude, thank you so much for coming. This was so special.
Yeah, this was amazing.
This was so special.
This has been beautiful.
Just a little bit of context. I didn't know what was going to happen. Oh, I want to tell this story real quick.
Yeah.
Like, I woke up this morning and like a vision from God. I mean, I'm talking 4K. I'm watching a television screen. I wake up, I'm half asleep. All of a sudden, I'm in the studio and there's lights on and there's microphone and I hear you zoomed up to the camera and you look at me. This is me this morning when I'm waking up, half asleep, and I hear you and I see you looking at me and you said, "My name is Aaron Burt and this is my suicide story." And I just thought, Lord, is it today? Is it going to be today? And then the day's going on, I texted you and I thought maybe we'll just test it out and set up the angles and then we'll do it another day. And then it's getting closer to the 7:30 p.m. I'm like, holy shit, Claudia, baby, like, it feels like it's going to be today. I don't know. I thought the baby was coming tomorrow. No, it's going to be today. We're going to do it.
Yeah. I was at the house and I was like, I was doing some work around the house. And I told Maria, and she was like, you go take a shower. You get your nicest shirt and you go do what you do. She said, you go and do what you do. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for being who you are, for what you represent, and for creating this platform and giving me this opportunity to step up and tell this story.
This was so good. And to many more.
Yeah,
you have so many fucking stories, man.
We got a few in there.
Well, we love you all. Thank you so much for listening. This was the best.
Thank you.
This was the best. Goodbye. We love you.
Peace.
Peace out.